Welcome everybody to this afternoon's BMA webinar looking at physical and mental well-being. It's nearly a year since we held our first webinar on returning to work after the initial pandemic, so it's very telling that in today's session we're still going to be looking at issues around the HR legalities of employees returning to work both after furlough and back to the office after a long period of working from home. And we hope to give you some practical advice and tips on how to look after employee physical and mental well-being at this time. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Clare is from Spark People Solutions. Clare Hodcroft has 25 years experience in senior HR leadership roles with some well-known brands in both the retail, energy, recruitment and industrial service sectors. Clare established Spark People Solutions during the 2020 pandemic, focusing on HR director support for SMEs, and she's passionate about doing things the right way. So finding solutions to help business owners grow their profit with really engaged teams. So without any further ado, over to you, Clare.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. So thanks for the introduction. Something's just popped up on my screen. Hang on a second. So thanks for the introduction. In my contact details are in this presentation, they'll be shared. So if any of you want to contact me afterwards, then please do. So what am I going to cover today? I'm just going to recap the landscape over the last year, because from a HR professional's perspective, there's been quite a lot to learn and a lot that we've all been supporting employers with. Talk about returning to work and some top tips and some principles around a good return to work. Talk about hybrid agile working and a little bit about vaccinations. So can you ask somebody to have a vaccination or not, and some of the risks associated with that. And then just to summarise at the end with a little checklist, which hopefully is helpful for you. So what has happened over the last 18 months? We're all really acutely aware of this whirlwind that's happened over the last 18 months. And no industry or sector has been unaffected. We've all experienced a huge, significant change to our lives. So furlough, as a HR professional, I've never heard of that 18 months ago. So we've all had to learn, get our heads around that and help communicate that. Home working, some businesses have never done that, never wanted to do that, and we've all had to adjust to that very quickly. Homeschooling, juggling on learning, online learning for children. Masks, do we wear them? When do we wear them? When should we wear them? Can we force somebody to wear them? All of the questions around that. How do we provide a COVID secure working environment for our people who are, and there's been lots of cases where offices have had to close following positive cases, even when they've done absolutely everything possible. Holidays, how do you manage those? Can you ask somebody to take them or not? How do we manage the change of and carrying over of holidays? So lots and lots of questions that needs to be answered over the last 18 months. Unfortunately, some companies have had no option but to make redundancies. More recently, there's been the challenges about vaccinations, which I will come on to. Coupled with all of this has been the challenges of Brexit. And there's no wonder, really, that all of this has had such a huge impact on all of our mental health. And some businesses have been really great at recognising the need to support their teams, but others still really have their heads in the sands over this. So, and really need to learn an awful lot around this topic. So what about the workplace? It's really evolved as a result of COVID-19. The BBC's latest survey suggests that the UK's 50 largest companies, that 86% of them plan to permanently have flexible working, hybrid working or agile working. And I was speaking to a consultant from Deloitte last week, and they did a survey last year about the future of pay and reward, and that they really believe that flexibility of working patterns is going to be expected from some employees on the back of COVID-19, which will have a lot of implications on reward practices over the long term. And they predict that employees will place more emphasis on the culture and the environment and having a more holistic work experience than they will around pay. Another survey that I read this week quoted a survey of 500 companies that 170 would be continuing flexible working arrangements, with 65 continuing to be completely remote. And we are seeing a trend of pop-up offices, rent a desk, rent a room in a large city, and other companies really looking to decrease their office space. So a lot of changes on the back of and during COVID-19. So how do your teams feel about returning to work? Some people probably can't wait to get back in the office. They don't have the equipment, they don't have the space, they can't concentrate at home, they prefer working around and being surrounded by other people. Some may have really got used to working at home and prefer to be there. It saves them on commuter costs. They're able to better manage their work-life balance and less interruptions. Everyone is different, and what is really, really important is not to apply your own personal preferences. Never assume and always ask. Some people may have lost a lot of confidence because they've been out of the workplace. Some may feel very isolated. Some may be very anxious about returning to work. Some may even feel that they don't know their job anymore. So it's important to really ask questions of your people to understand how they're feeling and never to assume. Whatever the model that you decide with returning to work, it's important to understand that as an employer, you cannot force somebody to return to work if the workplace is unsafe. So the workplace must be safe. There is a duty on employers, HR professionals, occupational health people, and employees to understand how to make a workplace safe. Risk assessments are essential, both for being in the office, but also for those that are home working. And making decisions about returning to work should be done in a non-discriminatory way. So if you're thinking of changing working hours for everyone, have a think about how that could impact on everybody, because it could impact on women more than it could impact on men. And there's the potential there for indirect discrimination. Doing things in a compassionate way is so important, and the role of the manager is absolutely critical. And to ensure that employees have an active and valued voice in this situation is really critical to businesses adapting a safe and successful return to work. So I'm going to move on to some principles here of a good return to work. Reassurance is key to ensuring a great return to work, giving the appropriate notice of return to work, managing people's expectations around what to expect, what will it look like, has it changed, are they sitting in the same place, is there a one-way system, are the screens up, who will be there. So understanding all of that and managing expectations and identifying any obstacles will really, really help people return to work successfully. Making sure your managers are aware and understand employment law. So not understanding the law can really run the risk of creating disputes around a breach of contract, and can also create ill feeling, unrest amongst employees. And if there is a change of location, so someone will be working from the office and from home, then there is potential contractual implications there, which I'll come on to. And it's important managers understand around, can they make somebody return to work or not? And I'll come on to that shortly. Creating the right culture is key to a good return to work. It needs to be inclusive, it needs to be supportive, so that everyone feels that they're returning to a supportive and caring environment. The pandemic has had an unequal impact across the workforce, and different groups and individuals have been affected in different ways. But building an inclusive working environment that doesn't tolerate any discriminations is really essential. The key to all this is working together to resolve any concerns. Other things to think about So particularly for those that have been out of the business for a really, really long time, think about doing an induction or a reorientation. Reconnecting with people is going to be really, really important. And before they return to work, think about doing some virtual conversations or meet for coffee, and understand how people feel, what worries they have, and how you can help. I was reading last night about this seems to be a bit of a trend around a right to disconnect policy. So if you are considering a hybrid working, it's also thinking about how to help people switch off at home and that people have the right to disconnect to avoid any kind of burnout. And another thing that I read this morning, obviously there's a lot of things coming out this week on the back of yesterday's announcement, but to consider hybrid working officers. So if you are considering hybrid working, having people where people can go to them if something isn't quite going right, or need to make any adjustments to the arrangements that they've got, basically making everything easier and less daunting. You'll be able to get to the heart of what people are thinking and make it a success. So here's some questions that I thought about that might be helpful just to chat through. So can employees refuse to return to work? So what are your legal obligations here? You owe employees a duty of care as an employer, and you need to ensure that you've implemented safety measures to protect all your employees and that risk assessments have been carried out. Failure for you to comply with your obligations may amount to negligence. And the law is really very clear that if an employee feels that their place of work is unsafe, that they are protected and they can refuse to attend work. They should, if they do raise a concern, they should not be put at any detriment for raising a concern. In the employees' side, the law is there to protect them. So the Employment Rights Act of 1996, if someone is treated unfairly or dismissed or chooses to resign as a result of raising a health and safety issue, then they may have a claim. And whether that's justified at tribunal or not really depends on whether the concerns and beliefs were reasonable and justified, whether the employee had followed guidance, and the extent of the danger they would be placed under if they returned to work. There was a recent case, Rogers versus Leeds Laser Cutting Limited, where the individual took the company to tribunal, claiming he'd been unfairly dismissed. However, he was refusing to return to work at all and until the pandemic was over. Or as the tribunal said, that actually it was reasonable to expect you to go back to work once those safety issues had been fixed. So that's one of what I'm sure will be many tribunal cases on this topic. The second question, I've been asked to return to work but do not feel safe using public transport. I was asked this the other day. Can I refuse to return or insist my employee pays, organises safe transport to and from work? It's an unprecedented area. You have a duty of care, but there's no obligations unless it is contractual. It really does depend on individual circumstances. And unfortunately, in this case, there's unlikely to be definitive guidance on this until there is a tribunal case. And if they are concerned about this, you should encourage them to talk to you about it, understand the reasons why, and ask questions. Is it an underlying medical condition? Because therefore it could be on health and safety grounds, and they could potentially have protection by employment rights. An employee could have protection, but there's no definitive guidance on this, unfortunately, as there's been no tribunal case yet. The third question I thought of, and I have been asked this as well, I don't want to return to work. Can I negotiate with my employer to continue working from home? Ultimately, it comes down to the reasons behind the request and whether it's sustainable to continue working from home or not. And if they have concern about returning, they should talk to you. They can make a formal, flexible working request, and you would have to justify any refusal. Can you refuse it? Yes, you can refuse it. And there are a number of different reasons that you can refuse a flexible working request. If it's the burden of additional costs, detrimental effect on the business, on the quality, on performance. There's about 8 or 9 different reasons where you'd be able to refuse a request. And with regards to dismissal, the law protects employees who do raise health or safety concerns, which can be classed as whistleblowing. So regardless of somebody's length of service, if they blow the whistle, they are protected, and if they are dismissed, they could claim automatic unfair dismissal. So hopefully those questions helped answer some of the ones you may be getting from your employees. Hybrid agile working. I've attended loads of webinars on this recently. The really important thing in all of this is to understand what people want. And the best way to do this is to ask them either through a survey or for small focus groups, but really understand what do people want. It helps you to have a successful return to work and manage this successfully. But it is important that if you have employee or trade union representatives, you also talk to them about it. And also, if this is the route that you're choosing to go down, that all senior managers are bought into the approach. So you're all aligned, this is the approach. So you've got a consistent approach. Things to think about: are there minimum days you want people in the office? Are you continuing with total flexibility and just letting the teams manage it? And if anybody wants any support with this, then really happy to support you with this afterwards. The key thing, if you are considering hybrid agile working, is there a change to the terms of an employee's contract of employment? So it can have an impact on someone's contract of employment if their place of work changes. And if you are choosing this route, you can't push this through unilaterally, although employees are likely to agree to it if it's to their personal benefit. It's really important to be aware of the different options available and the possible pitfalls. So you do need to speak to the employee about this. You do need to get their consent. You do need if you are changing a clause in a contract, it needs to be very clear. Any ambiguity will be decided in the favour of the employee. So, and any objections must be considered on a case-by-case basis. So, some things to think about there. Flexible working. So, what is flexible working? Flexible working is a way of working that suits somebody's needs. For example, flexible start and finish times, working from home. And getting flexible working right really comes down to the culture of an organisation, which must be set from the top. And all employees have a legal right to request flexible working, not just parents and carers. And this is known as making a statutory application. As an employer, you must deal with it in a reasonable manner. And you must assess the disadvantages and advantages of the application, hold a meeting to discuss the request of the employee, and offer an appeal process. So I could talk for ages on flexible working, but I will move on. Vaccinations. So it's progressing. Obviously, everyone's being encouraged to have a vaccine, and as we probably heard in the news in June, nurses and colleagues working in care homes across England must be vaccinated under new legislation. But with regards to your employees, can you require your staff to take a COVID vaccine? There are some potential legal hurdles with this, and you need to really think about it. If you are looking to do a mandatory approach to this, I really would suggest that you take some proper legal advice on this. There needs to be very clear reasons why you are mandating having everybody take a vaccine. So is it lowering the risk to other members of staff? Is it or vulnerable customers or service users? But again, it's unprecedented cases here with regards to this. Can you make a particular role have a vaccine? Yes, potentially. If it's maybe a reasonable management instruction, particularly where employees are in contact with vulnerable service users. But again, it'd be more difficult to justify if they're not in those kind of roles. And I would recommend seeking some legal advice on this. The important thing is always to listen to people's concerns. Should you, as an employer, encourage someone to take the vaccine? Absolutely. The Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 requires you to take reasonable steps to reduce workplace risks, and encouraging employees to be vaccinated to protect themselves, colleagues, clients, customers is a really positive thing to do and will be seen as a reasonable step. Can employees refuse to take the vaccine? Yes, and there may be a number of reasons why, so which could be covered by the Equality Act of 2010. Some employees may have religious or philosophical beliefs for refusing to take the vaccine. Whilst most religions do not disagree with vaccinations in principle, some religions do disagree with any medical intervention. The NHS guidance is really, really clear that there's no animal products in the COVID vaccine. However, some vegans may disagree with vaccinations that have been tested on animals. And also, NHS guidance right now is that if you're pregnant, pregnant ladies are not routinely being offered the vaccine unless they're at high risk of COVID or of serious complications in a pregnancy. So you should really carefully think about a blanket vaccine policy because it could affect people with protected characteristics. So if it's pregnancy, religion, or philosophical beliefs, you should always weigh it all up. It's important that individual views are treated to respect and that erosion of that mutual trust and confidence. There's also a lot around the COVID pass right now, and that more and more of that will be coming out. So to summarise, because I know that I've talked for quite a long time, here is a quick checklist which hopefully will help you. So think about your health and safety. Do you have a safe working environment? What risk assessments do you have in place? Do you know what your people want? How will you, if you are choosing to adopt hybrid agile working, how will you adjust to that more permanently? Do contracts need to change? What is the plan for integrating everyone back to work, checking on their engagement, and plan activities to measure how engaged people are? Do you need to make any reasonable adjustments for people? Do people need some training to get back into work? And how are you supporting your employees, whether their mental health and well-being, which Harry and John will talk to you about going forward. So that's all from me today. Very happy to help you all. I hope you found that interesting.
Thank you very much, Claire, for that presentation. I thought it was really thought-provoking. Through the transition to return to the office, I think if my takeaway from your presentation was if employers listen, seek to understand the views of their employees, exercise as much compassion as possible, and focus on inclusivity, they're going to be in a relatively good place. The points made around vaccination were quite terrifying. Actually, it's a bit of a minefield that people need to walk through very carefully. But some really good takeaways for our members in that presentation. Thank you. Next up, we've got Harry Bliss. Harry's CEO and co-founder of Champion Health, which is a workplace health organisation that brings all areas of wellbeing into one platform. Following Harry's friend and mentor taking his own life in 2018, Champion Health set out on a mission to empower employees to optimise their well-being. So over to you, Harry.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully, fantastic. Well, thank you for the introduction, Tom, and thank you for taking the time out to be able to listen to me today talking about health and well-being. And I'll really start talking about mental health and well-being strategies within your organisation. Now, the first thing that I really want to touch upon within here is around the why behind well-being, and always ask yourself as to why you are doing something. Now, as Tom mentioned, this was my friend and mentor, James. He was a director of a global organisation that operated on the FTSE 100. His career went from strength to strength, and he invested a huge amount of time into me to be able to support me in growing Champion Health over the last 4 years. Now, 6 months into Champion's journey, James tragically ended up taking his own life following a short bout of workplace stress. This was someone that had been hugely successful, someone that had a wife and 2 children that were fantastic, all the way through to someone that raised over £750,000 for charity. And so first of all, this is my why behind Wellbeing, but just consider what's your why behind supporting your team's well-being. So first of all, a little bit about Champion. So we're a solution provider when it comes to wellbeing. We bring all areas of wellbeing into one platform that's been described as the Netflix of wellbeing. So just like Netflix have everything from Peppa Pig through to Peaky Blinders, The Crown, that's exactly what we're doing with wellbeing. So there's one provider that you've got to manage, not 15 or 20, for example. Now, really, the big challenge when it comes to wellbeing is mental health specifically. And we've found a twofold increase in mental health, poor mental health outcomes across the last year. And this is just data from our platform that over 50% are experiencing negative stress at work, over 60% are experiencing at least mild symptoms of anxiety, and 58% are experiencing regular depressive symptoms. Now, if we look at eye strain, I've got some new spectacles on at the moment because I'm working longer hours than I was pre-pandemic, for example. That's increased by threefold, but there's also lower back pain as well within there. And that's something that John will come on to discuss shortly. And that's a major area as well. And of course, all of these areas are interlinked. But the last 18 months, there was a problem before then, but the last 18 months now, the problem has got even bigger. And we're going to find in the future, absenteeism may look at increasing all the way through to presenteeism, which is working whilst you're not at your most productive. That could lead to all sorts of mistakes, for example, within the organisation. And so let's reflect on, okay, there's the moral case of looking at well-being, and it's the right thing to do. That's what I hope everyone on this call will consider. But there's also three other elements. There's firstly the business case. How much does it cost an organisation in staff turnover if employees aren't optimising their well-being? What about recruitment and poor recruitment, potentially not recruiting the best talent? And that's a big area at the moment tying into well-being. It's a question that all employers are being asked, especially by a newer generation coming through in the workforce. And so what is the return on investment, first of all, for good well-being? Well, it's huge, and that's something that I'll share with you. There's also the reputational risk of not taking care of employees' well-being, whether that's just your employees talking down at the pub about the working conditions, for example, all the way through to getting in the likes of the Times, which quite a few organisations have over the last 2 to 3 months. And the final element is then the legal and compliance angle. And so you need to conduct stress risk assessments, as Claire mentioned earlier on, and insurers are seeing work-related stress claims potentially being the new whiplash. That's what 2 insurers said to me in the last couple of months. So there's the business case, there's the reputational case, but also the legal case on top of the moral case, first of all. So I'm going to share with you, first of all, what a wellbeing strategy isn't. And a wellbeing strategy isn't an employee assistance program. So that's counselling helplines. That forms part of a strategy, but the strategy is really a framework to support your team. It's not healthcare insurance. It's not based on gut feel. It needs to be data led. And again, I'll share with you how you can get that data to be able to support your team in the areas that mean the most to them. It's not a tick box exercise. And today, this morning, I delivered a panel to a team of 150 people. And the main thing that came through was authenticity when it comes towards well-being, that you can't just solve well-being through a tick box exercise. It needs to be authentic. It needs to be genuine. And the final thing, a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's not a fruit bowl as well. That's where well-being strategies have evolved the last 15 or 20 years. So the first tip that I give to you is to start with data and end with data. If we don't have the data, we don't have a strategy. It's all based on gut feel. And so what we need to be able to do is through a 10-15 minute survey. I'd strongly recommend this is put together by experts within the wellbeing field, that you can start to understand, okay, is there work-related stress issues? What are the energy levels like? Do my team feel parts of a team? And how is the culture within the organisation? And that will then start to underpin the interventions and initiatives that you might want to put together. So hypothetically, let's say 80% of the workforce have lower back pain. That would then make perfect sense. Then look at physiotherapy, for example. Similarly, it may be mental well-being, it may be financial well-being and financial anxiety that's the main issue. And so start with the data. You can then build your initiatives around it and then look at following up with data as well to see if it's worked. So that's the first element. The second element is looking at what employees want versus what they need. Sometimes these two things can differ, and it's really important to distinguish the difference. So what do I want? I want to be on a 6-figure salary. What do I need? I actually need training in supporting my financial well-being. That's just one example within there. So again, really look at when you collect the data, look at what employees want first of all, because if you can start to tailor things around what they want, it's much more likely to be successful. And the second thing is looking at what they really need. And that again will underpin the interventions and solutions that you can put in place to support your team, because all of our organizations are unique and we all face unique challenges. So there's not one silver bullet within here. The next thing is looking at proactive and reactive. Now, for a long time, workplace health and well-being has been reactive to problems. And as you can see here, the triangle is very, very narrow at the bottom. It's much wider at the top. That's because you impact many more people when you focus on a proactive stance to when you focus on a reactive stance. So what I mean by this is if someone's got a mental health issue, for example, you then provide them with a counselling helpline. That's reacting to the problem. Whereas actually, if we can be proactive and preempt issues, give them the training, for example, start with an assessment, support them with the strategy and the awareness, that's when we can have the biggest impact upon individuals' well-being. Now, when it comes to a return on investment, I'm sure we're all familiar with the organisation Deloitte. They stated that when you look at reactive mental health support, the average return on investment is 3 to 1. So for every £1,000 invested, £3,000 is returned. And that's through reducing absenteeism, through reducing staff turnover and improving productivity in your sales team, for example, or creativity in your marketing departments. Now, when you look at proactive mental health support, that's 5 to 1. So for every £1,000 invested, 5,000 is returned. And so again, line manager workshops, health coaching, but then you look at an organizational wide culture / awareness raising, it's then 6 to 1. It's double that of the reactive interventions. So you can see there tailored web portals, for example. And this study has been collected all of the best studies around workplace health and being able to see what the average return on investment is. Now, what does that look like in practice? Normally, when I do these talks, they're a whole day sometimes. And so I'm trying to squeeze it into 10 or 15 minutes for you. But what this looks like in practice is, okay, there's an organization with 500 employees, as you can see at the top of the screen, and they spent £80 per employee. Now, we spend £120, £150 on Christmas dues for a hangover. £80 won't break the bank. So a company of 500, it was a £40,000 intervention. And when you look at the return on investment, it's more than 9 to 1. So £47,000 was returned within 1 year. Now, what this looked at doing was starting with the data. The data then suggested interventions. They then put the interventions in place. Employees then engaged with those interventions. They then followed up, and that was the return on investment. So that's just one example of an organization actually really building that business case out and improving the bottom line, but also humans' health and well-being. So that's just a brief overview of the key things to be able to focus on. So looking at starting with the data, focusing on all areas of well-being at the start, and then building those initiatives and interventions, and make sure you look at the proactive and the reactive side of things as well. Just echoing what Claire mentioned before in terms of listening to your people. And that's such an important thing, but then acting upon that afterwards as well. So as I mentioned, we built something that we're aiming to become the Netflix of wellbeing. That's a solution at the core of organisations such as the NHS, all the way through to global banks. But we'd also love to be able to support you. So if you would like to get in touch and go through a demo of the platform, then please don't hesitate to email harry.bliss@championhealth.co.uk. I'll pass over to John now, who's going to deliver a masterclass on physical health and musculoskeletal health for the next 10 or 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good stuff. I hope you're all sat a bit more straighter than this, my first slide. My name is Jonathan Daniel. I'm Director of FitBack Physiotherapy, and we're working with the Bathroom Manufacturers Association, supporting some of their companies that form the membership. We've been pretty busy during the pandemic since March last year. We were all thrown home, told to go home. Some employees were kitted out with various bits of kit to work from home, and some were just sent home without any suitable desks to work from seated postures into DSC equipment as well. So we've been busy for the last year and a half, since March last year, supporting companies through their DSC requirement. A lot of our on-site services were put on hold, and so we've done a lot of virtual consultations since March of last year. Now that things are starting to return to some sort of normality, our on-site clinics are back in our manufacturing and distribution sites, but we're still seeing a lot of home workers. And as Claire was talking about earlier, with hybrid working is going to be the new norm. What we're seeing talking to companies is that the first question asked at interviews now are, how flexible is the job? Whereas it used to be the last question asked. Any further questions? Can I work from home once a month? It's often the first questions now. And the important thing from our point of view, from a musculoskeletal point of view, is that our employees are supported as well at home as they are in the offices. Lots of the health and wellbeing days and the initiatives that we've supported companies with in the past have taken place in the office space. But now with people working from home, what we're seeing is that it's a bit of out of sight, out of mind. You can see someone walk into work, into the office space with a bad back, or having injured themselves playing football at the weekend. But those individuals that are at home, you can't see them exhibiting their kind of symptoms and things. So it's really important to kind of keep touch with people as well. Harry, if you could just move on the slide for me. We spend a lot of time in a flex posture when we work. So now that I'm presenting here, I'm in a bit of a flex posture. When we drive, when we're preparing food in the morning, from the moment we get up until the time we go to bed, we spend very much time in a flex posture. We forget to extend our bodies and arch back and extend our spines and extend our joints. And as a result, we can get lots of tightness in our muscles and in our nerves. And we're seeing a huge increase in things like repetitive strain, carpal tunnel type symptoms in the hand from working in poor postures. Very few people have remained the same level of activity now than they did pre-pandemic. So we're seeing extremes of one to the other. So potentially people have more time on their hands and they've got a more structure to their day, and they can spend more time exercising. But on the flip side of that, people aren't commuting, so they're not walking, they're not getting in their car, they're not using public transport or walking to work, and therefore a certain percentage of people have become less active. And it's really important to kind of create structure to your day, to incorporate exercise into your day. And this goes for those employees still working from home, but also those in the office as well. And also that creates an environment where it improves your mental health when you're getting away from the screen as well. Harry, if you could just move on, please. One of the key things is trying to find time during the day to exercise. And one thing I would say is that people say, look, I'm so busy from 8 o'clock in the morning through to 5 or 6. I just don't have any time to do any kind of form of exercise. And recently I've been chatting with quite a few people the last year or so, just asking them how many times a day they make cups of tea and coffee. And most people get up and go to the kettle and flick the kettle on probably about 4 or 5 times a day to make a hot drink. And when I question is what they do during that time when they're actually waiting for the kettle to boil, they're either on their mobile phones looking at social media, or they go and sit back down at the laptop and carry on the work they're doing. And actually just 2 or 3 minutes a few times a day is an excellent opportunity to actually do some really worthwhile exercises, to start stretching out those tight muscles, and actually just to change your mindset as well. And actually, if you're able to perform a few exercises just for a few minutes, a few times a day, it's a really, really good way of resetting your body and actually coming back to your laptop and ready for action, if you like. What I want to do is to go through a 4-minute video with you called the Daily 9. And this is something that we put together pre-pandemic for our clients, but actually we've been using it really, really well during the last year and a half. I'm going to share my screen in a minute to go through the exercises. But this is something which, as an employer, you could pass on to your employees to make sure there's consistency and make sure that you're motivating people throughout the day to keep active. But also, this is something that can be also incorporated into the workplace as well. So I'm going to go through 9 exercises called the Daily 9 because they're 9 exercises. I'm going to push back my chair and demonstrate these exercises. And then what we can do is finish with all of us getting up on our feet if we're able to, and having a bit of a stretch, and hopefully you'll be able to participate in that as well. So I'm going to demonstrate the exercises before I play the video. Excuse me, wearing my shorts, hopefully you can see me now. So when we're sat down, we're in a very flexed posture, so all our joints are in a flexed position. And so marching on the spot is a really nice exercise just to free up your pelvis and your low back. Our muscles in our quads and in our calf muscles as well are becoming very static, and so they're not pumping blood around the body, and therefore we can end up with sort of swollen ankles and things as well from spending a lot of time sat down. So a simple squat up and down is a really, really nice way of getting the major muscle groups, your quads and also your glutes active as well. Going up onto tiptoes, so just a little calf raise is a really nice way to start pumping the blood around our lower body and to get the fluid and blood pumping around and to reduce swelling. We often forget to twist, and our bodies are designed to bend, twist and turn. And actually twisting our upper body is a really important movement that we need to maintain as well. And we often forget to do that on a daily basis. And so we can end up being sat in a position for very, for long periods of time and almost becoming quite chair-shaped. A forgotten stretch as well is a side stretch. Our muscles on the sides also need to move. And that's actually a movement that we forget to do regularly as well. And then extending, we're going to be arching back as well. So that's an extension position, getting out of that flexed posture that we find ourselves stuck in the chair a lot as well. With our shoulders, as I mentioned earlier, we spend a lot of time in a round shouldered position. What we're going to do is to do a gentle stretch on the shoulders to get these joints mobilizing back and forth. So fingers locked behind your head and taking your shoulders back. And what this does is starts to stretch all the nerves and the muscles in the arms. Also our neck. Movements of our neck are up and down, left and right and side to side. Don't roll your neck and get that, creates a bit of crunching in the joints and not very comfortable. So we can look left, look right, side to side and up and down. And finally, the last stretch, which is a nice exercise, is one of the nicest ones. And if you're to choose one in terms of upper body and arms, this is a great stretch. What we're doing is looking down and then stretching up and arching back. So we're going from this position and arching back. And this is a great exercise to stretch all the nerves to help prevent tingling and pins and needles in the hand as well. I'm going to try to share my screen and play this video now. If you are able to, all the cameras are off, so there won't be any embarrassment for anyone. If you can push back your chairs and stand in front of your screen and join in with these if you can, that would be absolutely great. Let me just try to share. So the first exercise is marching on the spot. Can you all see that, Tom? If you could just let me know, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can see that, Jonathan, no problem.
Right. We're going down into the squats. Down to the calf raises. And then the side stretch of the muscles at the side. What's nice is to increase the stretch over your head as well. Each time you go over, just to get a bit more of a stretch. and then back extension. And then shoulder stretch, link your fingers at the back of your head, take your elbows together, and then just stretch back and forth. And then the next stretch, up and down. Some of you may click and clunk as you do this, if you're a little bit stiff. Just repeat those. Nearly there, one more exercise after this. And then the last exercise is shoulder stretch, which is really good for any tightness in your arms. Looking down and then stretching right back. If you bend your wrist back as well, and come back down. You may feel a tightness or a pulling sensation down your arms, and this is all the nerves and the muscles stretching. Great. I wasn't able to see if anyone was joining in, so hopefully a few of you managed to join in there. Thank you. So this is my, I guess, my little plug, which is probably quite appropriate for the BMA. This is how we're able to support organisations. We are an affiliate member, and we've organised some good deals for the BMA's client base. We're able to provide remote support, supporting employees working at home in that kind of new hybrid model, supporting individuals with back pain, any kind of DSE problems or setups, etc. And also for larger organisations, we can provide on-site services, so we can have musculoskeletal assessments, workplace health assessments, looking at manual handling support, and also providing wellbeing days as well. So back pain workshops and soft tissue massage sessions, etc. as well. Thank you ever so much for watching. Hopefully that's been well received and you've got up and exercised. Certainly I feel a little bit looser after doing that as well. Case of practicing what I preach. So over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks to Harry and Claire as well for your presentations. Got a couple of questions which have been sent in beforehand, and also one from Amy. And please do, anyone in the audience, if you want to submit a question, either type it in the meeting chat or use the raise hand tool, and it can come to you to verbally give your question. But the first one was for Claire, and it was around the reasons for refusing a request to continue to work from home. There's can you take an individual approach based on an individual's performance and capability over the course of the last 12-18 months, or does it have to be a kind of single policy for everyone with that job function within your business?
So it's interesting because I've had a couple of conversations about this week. So where I think it'll be most successful is where culturally there is a similar approach across the business. So flexibility for roles that can work from home, but roles that have worked from home over the last 18 months, it would be really difficult to then say it can no longer work from home. So I think you need to take that into consideration. For roles that have never worked from home, obviously that's a bit more of a challenge. You need to be able to review that. So it may be that that role can be. So yes, I would consider individual circumstances, but broadly culturally, what is the approach of the business and is everybody bought in? I think I was chatting to another HR director from another business at the weekend, and they've gone with the manager decides what they want to do. Well, that brings its challenges in that some managers may want 100% of their team in 100% of the time, and other managers may be like, oh well, we've managed it okay for the last 18 months, there's no problem, yeah, carry on doing that. And that in itself can bring some issues, for inequality issues, and just mistrust and just poor engagement as a business, really having those differences. So having everybody on board with an approach is the best way, and then consider everyone's individual circumstances and whether the role can be done from home or not.
Thank you, Claire. Harry, on mental well-being, a conversation we as a team had before this session this morning actually was the amount of literature and webinars and so on and so forth around mental health at the moment. There's perhaps a greater focus on mental health in the workplace than ever before. Do you feel that there needs to be more action to go alongside the discussion around mental well-being?
I think it's a really good point. And I've only been in the workforce for 6 or 7 years, so I'm not best placed to comment on what it was like a bit of time ago. But from all of the conversations we have, every organisation is now looking at it and looking at this seriously. And it's the ones that are genuine about well-being and mental well-being, they're the ones that are going to get the most out of people, because I want to work for an organisation that's truly investing in me and believes I'm the most important asset, not necessarily the physical goods, for example. I'd say there is a major area of translating awareness into action. Now, awareness is great. I think we're all aware that mental health is important. It's the action and the actions that you take that employees will really judge you on as an organisation going forwards. And that's where we're looking to bridge the gap. It is very important to raise the initial awareness, but I think we're there as a society. I think now it's actually giving solutions and interventions into employees' hands, training up our line managers, enabling the data-driven decisions that I spoke about, all the way through to all of your exercise classes, through to your mindfulness, for example, in one place. And that's really what we're looking to do. So I think there's been a lot of awareness over the last 5 years. Now the action's starting to happen. And I'd strongly recommend to anyone on this event that you do really look at translating the awareness into action.
Thanks, Harry. Coming to you, Jonathan. As you know, BMA members, we've got the full kind of gamut of potential MSD risks within our businesses, from lugging about heavy pieces of sanitary wear to people that have been working from home for the last 12 months, particularly if they're in something like a sales or marketing function. What of those different risks, what present to you the biggest challenges at the moment? And then I'm going to fire a second question while you're mulling that one over, and that comes from Amy, and that's around how often a day would you recommend that we move about and stretch out if we're normally tied to a desk? Oh, you're on mute.
There's a second pound.
There's a pound in the box. The second question is the easier one. I would say every 45 minutes or so, you need to be getting up and changing postures, just to change your posture. So there's lots of physiological benefit from moving in the balance vestibular system, cardiovascular as well. So getting up, moving regularly, taking walking meetings if you can, on the phone. You don't need to be sat on your mobile phone at your desk. You can walk around outside now that the weather's good, etc. So keeping moving as much as possible. The first question is, those who are in a sales role that potentially pre-COVID were lugging bits of heavy equipment around, potentially they've become deconditioned to that specific job role over the time. So if they're now firstly for driving, so driving is, if people aren't used to it, they're having to get back in the car, do longer hours, longer miles on the road. And then after they've been sat in the cars, then humping, heavy bits of equipment out. So there's the physical risk of that as well. sedentary workers are at as much risk for different types of back pain than those in more of a manual job. So with those manufacturers potentially who have probably been working right through COVID because of the demand for your kind of products, there's that physical kind of slant to their job, and they're more likely to have more kind of muscle pulls, etc. But for people who are sat sedentary and they're not changing postures regularly or moving or exercising as much, they're at risk of mechanical back pain. And that type of pain is really easy to sort out through some of the basic exercise that we've just done today, and also some of the other exercise videos that we have available as well to your members, to keep themselves moving and keep themselves going regularly. What's interesting, and Claire could probably back me up on this, is that actually sickness absence from musculoskeletal conditions has actually been pretty low during COVID for those working at home, because if you've got a long commute and that commute's making your back pain worse, you're unable to do it, you're going to phone in sick. But actually, if you've got back pain, you can scrape yourself out of bed and even sit with your laptop in bed potentially. So I'm not sure, we're seeing that musculoskeletal absence has actually been quite low because people haven't been reporting it as much. So that's where, the whole presenteeism issue could be rife. You may have employees sat at home with crippling back pain, you're just not really getting to know it because they're just soldiering through the day, really. So what we're seeing is now people are starting to return to the office. That's when your sickness absence could go up because, they're saying that they can't travel or can't travel on public transport because of their back pain, etc.
Just a quick follow-up on that one before I come to some other questions. On presenteeism, John, is there any data out there as to what the impact on productivity of a case of presenteeism is?
It's really difficult to measure unless you're in a sort of factory environment where you've got a specific pick rate that you're trying to achieve to earn your X pounds an hour or your kind of wage. So there's lots of people who would be sort of carrying problems that hasn't come to the surface. They may be relying on colleagues next to them to do extra lifting, and the presenteeism is really difficult to measure from a cost point of view. But presenteeism is the stats show that it can cost almost twice as much as it can of being at work on full duty. So it's very hard to measure, and unless you have specific measuring tools to do it, it goes unnoticed. And people soldier on for many years who are maybe on amended duties, but they haven't been properly assessed by a physiotherapist and given return to work plans. So that's the kind of work that we do as well, and work on projects on people who are present at work, who are on amended duty. So that's something which we can help companies with as well.
Folks, we've reached the hour. Are you okay to just field 3 more questions if we run over slightly?
Yeah, I've got till 5 past, and then I've got to call it just after them.
Okay, I'll come to your question first then, Harry. Are you finding mental health of employees rising in consciousness of boards and management teams? And secondly, does acceptance and discussion need to be demonstrated from the top if that consciousness doesn't exist?
Yeah, I was again talked about this morning that you need to get the senior executive team bought into it. If you have one person that's not bought in, that's when initiatives can really fall down, because again, it's that genuine element and that authenticity that's coming through. And I think senior executive teams have seen the data. That's what they always want. That's why they've got to the positions that they're in. They're very good at analysing data. And as John said, it's quite hard to measure certain things like presenteeism, but the systematic reviews that have come out from the likes of Deloitte and other leading organisations, it's just damning. And it makes total sense as well that if you look after your employees, they will look after the business. And we look at it the last year, people have been cropping up our organisations from their kitchen table, for example, working longer hours than ever before, and they need to be and feel like the organisation's investing in them. And they're the organisations that are now generating the greatest shareholder return. So the message to senior executives is, if you don't believe in it, okay, that's one thing. But if you don't believe that it's going to benefit the business, then that's sort of poor executive management within there. And people are going to vote with their feet. So I think there has been a huge shift in terms of the consciousness to answer that question. And the acceptance, it is so important for initiatives to be well received.
Question from Darren, which I think is probably for you, Claire, was around there's a big figure in our industry called Charlie Mullins, who runs Pimlico Plumbers, who has been quite prominent in saying no jab, no job, effectively, to people going out and and making installations in of plumbing fixtures. Obviously, a lot of our members directly employ people to go out and install their products themselves. Do they have to be careful about making sweeping statements such as Charlie's?
Yeah, for the reasons that I talked about earlier. So, you know, you can't force somebody to have. There may be some discriminatory reason why someone, or some belief or some religious belief why someone does not want to have one. So, I mean, if the job requires it, as is now law for those in care homes, that's slightly different. So, anyone considering that really should take legal advice and understand the risks, because there are legal risks associated with taking that kind of decision.
Thanks, Claire. And then finally, a question for the whole panel, if that's okay. And it's a very kind of general question around whether physical, or do you think, and I suppose the secondary question is, how soon will physical and mental well-being be as important as company pensions and other parts of the reward package be within businesses? Claire, can I come to you first?
Yeah, sure. I absolutely, yes, I do think this will be as important. I think it already is starting to be. So, you know, I've been interviewing recently, and they are some of the questions that I get. So flexibility of working, and you know, what support are you providing your people for their health and well-being, you know, are questions that I've been asked by candidates at interview. And I was chatting to this Deloitte consultant last week about the change and shift in reward and pay going forward. And you know, the research shows that people are looking for a more holistic business to work for, and that it isn't just about the money that they're paid. They're looking for other rewards, you know, be that support with mental health or well-being, be that what people are doing environmentally, is it sustainable, all of those kind of things will becoming more important to people than money. Of course, people need money to live, yes, absolutely, but that having that more holistic approach to work is certainly being seen, and it's happening now. It's happening now.
Thanks, Claire. John?
A fit and healthy workforce is a happy and productive workforce, particularly with the aging workforce as well. You know, we're living longer, we're working longer, and so if you want to, you know, from a kind of employee retention as well, investing in physical and mental health is so important.
Very good business case for making the interventions there, John. Harry?
I'd say, yeah, it is there with a lot of the organisations that we work with. It is a journey. No one completes wellbeing. There are always new people coming in. There are always new challenges that we face. But it's so important to see pensions, physical health, mental health as something that integrate. Our financial well-being is a really important part of our mental health and well-being. And I think actually we are there as a society now. So I think it's very promising for what the workplace are doing for people's well-being going forwards into not just the near-term future, but the long-term as well.
Thanks all three of you for presenting this afternoon and for leading our discussion. This is something that the BMA will be returning to on a fairly regular basis, issues of both physical and mental well-being. So we look forward to engaging with you guys again as we do that. Obviously, Jonathan and the FitBack team are important affiliate members of the association, and we're very pleased to be working with them on an ongoing basis. And if there's anything that they can do to support BMA members within their business, do get in touch, and we can connect you with John and his team. Thanks very much, everyone.
Brilliant.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Amy. Bye for now.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Bye.